This programme only reflects the personal views of the programme hosts and or the individual contributors.
Hello and welcome to Newsline. I'm your host, Harminder Singh. Today my guest is co-director of Hong Kong Free Press, Tom Grundy. Mr. Grundy, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you've started this new online English newspaper, Hong Kong Free Press. When do you plan to launch it? What is it? And why did you launch it?
Well, yeah, it's an English language news source for Hong Kong. It's new, completely independent, not-for-profit, free of charge. We're going to be running as an office, as a team throughout June, and at the very end we'll be launching that month.
Well, you're making quite a buzz with this. Normally a new, whether it's English or Chinese daily, does not have this type of buzz with it. What do you think that's making HKFP so unique in that respect?
I think we're overwhelmed by the response as well, and it just shows that there is great appetite for it and much need. We've always said this is a direct response to the press freedom situation in Hong Kong, and some of the messages we've got as people have donated, to the crowdfunding campaign have mentioned that. And a lot of the support has been coming from locals. It's not, an expat newspaper. It's for the Chinese diaspora. It's for the whole Chinese community, and I think there just needs to be more diversity on the English side of the media. In Chinese, you have this spectrum with all the pro-Beijing newspapers, over to just the Apple Daily over here, but a lot of independent media, lots of them, they such as Post 852, Stan News in media, but no equivalent kind of on the English side. So I think that's why we've seen such a big response. People want it to happen.
I find it interesting that you said that there's an appetite for it, yet you hear mostly that the English news in this city, there is no market for it. It's actually dying. But you found it quite surprising that there is an appetite for it, but why is there an appetite, and why English?
Well, we thought it would take a month to raise $150,000. We did it in 48 hours. And then we got double, and now we're heading towards $500,000 as we go into the last couple of weeks of crowdfunding. But it's a small proportion of people in Hong Kong who speak English, but a lot prefer to consume their news in English. There are people abroad who've left Hong Kong, families who want to check what's happening, back here, and particularly with the timing right after Occupy, I think there is an elevated sort of appetite to understand what's happening here and the puzzle that is Hong Kong and its future with China.
So what do you hope to achieve with Hong Kong Free Press?
But the very heart of it, the absolute basis of it, is that it is free. It's not going to be beholden to any corporate or political interests. Half of the media owners in Hong Kong are members of political bodies in China. So we are not for profit. Any penny we make just goes back into the company.
Is that sustainable though?
Well, with sustainability, it's a chicken and egg situation. We realized to build an audience you need money, and to get money you need an audience to attract advertisers and such. So this crowdfunding cash gets us through the first few months as we build the audience, but we won't be reliant on any one income stream. So we have crowdfunding, there'll be voluntary subscriptions, you can make one-off donations, merchandise sponsorship, advertising, native advertising, events, anything and everything. None of these things work on their own. The industry itself is having this debate, but we figure that all of them together, we're never going to have a team bigger than 10 people. We're up to 8 now. We think we can sustain ourselves. We won't be millionaires, but we simply want to have a credible news source with a half decently paid team.
You mentioned sustainability. That seems to be the problem happening worldwide with even the most well-known international papers. They're all bleeding money. So you are confident that you won't fall into the same trap?
Well, we underestimated the level of interest. You know, we had a lot of goodwill as we were setting this up.
Is that genuine interest though, or is it just a novelty of, oh look, it's something new, I'd like to see it come to fruition and then see what happens? Or do you think there will be a large readership right after that?
Well, I think it indicates the need for it. So I'm sure it will translate in the same way the goodwill we had as we were talking about this translated into the crowdfunding money. But you know, it's a debate and puzzle all of the media are having, and we're not afraid to experiment. But we've no doubt, you know, we're going to be here in years to come. This is certainly everything personally for me as well, leading up to this.
Hong Kong is overall insignificant on the world stage unless a major event happens, such as the umbrella movement last year. So how do you expect to gain readership outside of Hong Kong? Because still, as much as there's an interest in news in Hong Kong for Hong Kongers, it's difficult to sustain whether it's a free paper or a paid paper in Hong Kong without international
the way things
readership.
are going, we may be the only, you know, credible news source left. But you know, English, if you want to tell the Hong Kong story and what's happening here, not just after Occupy, but in the run-up to this important 2017 election, then you know, you need a free press in English. And you know, things are moving quite quickly. We're a startup, and things are changing week to week. And we've said that we'll be doing, you know, just breaking Hong Kong news to begin with. But already we've got a couple of people on our team, and we'll be doing some China stories as well. So it's scalable. And as we get more money and resources and people, we'll be able to fill the gap with other things, not just the kind of language and temporal and content gap we get between the Chinese and English media, but also gaps in things like investigative reporting, data journalism, and China coverage. You know, this should be a hub of free speech and holding to account the powerful over the border as well. But you know, so few in the press here seem to be fulfilling that role, and yet it's such a missed opportunity. Why is nobody doing it? So we want to expand into, you know, doing more coverage like that. And I really think, you know, there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens in Hong Kong. It just needs to be related better to an international audience. And unlike others, that we haven't got a paywall, we've got a decent website, and we think we can get some global traffic, and we're already targeting some of our promotion towards those abroad.
You mentioned that you don't have a paywall, so that means it's going to be free for everyone.
Yeah.
So why would people continue to fund you after the initial crowdfunding and crowdsourcing? Why would they continue to pay for it? Because usually when people receive news for free, it stays that way. They don't tend to pay for their content.
Well, nobody's, I think, donating to our crowdfunding for the T-shirts or mugs or whatever. They do it because they care about the issue, and I've seen these in the messages we've got. But you know, like I say, we've got, you know, 8 or 9 different income streams. So we're not too concerned about sustainability. We can be quite confident of it, hopefully.
Well, if you're not concerned about sustainability, I mean, you have to. If you plan.
It's not one of our biggest problems at the moment. I mean, we're trying to get, for instance, you know, a couple of pro-Beijing voices on the platform to complement, to have the full spectrum of contributors. So, you know, this is kind of a bootstrapping period where we need to prove our brand, get off the ground, have our team working together and producing news. But certainly we can bring all these online slowly, and you know, we're extremely efficient as well. You know, when it comes to question of sustainability, already some of the systems we have, how we share our context, how we move stories between us throughout the day, we've got very efficient systems and good teams. So you know, we're going to worry about that a little bit later. You
mentioned that you're going to have some China coverage. Does that mean you will have correspondents in the mainland, or will they just be looking at stories from Hong Kong concerning the mainland and just putting it into?
We've been equally overwhelmed with the number of contributors who've come to us. We haven't even put a call out. So some of those are abroad, but I don't think we will ever really, at the moment, expand to a position where we'd be able to send correspondence or have any in the mainland. And I think, although I daren't compare ourselves to your Wall Street Journals and New York Times, Bloomberg, many of those can't get in, can't get their best reporters into the mainland, and they do a pretty decent job with some of their stories. So everyone in the media industry as well is having to deal with the issues of access with China. It will be a smaller part of our coverage when we start up, but as I say, we want to look more deeply into it.
All right. Now, we know that the dominant English paper in Hong Kong is the South China Morning Post. Are you... pretty much. I mean, there is the Standard, but the dominant one is definitely South China Morning Post. Are you looking to compete with them?
They've got, hundreds of staff, huge buildings, decades of experience in coffee makers and things like that. We've got a coffee maker, but we can't compete. I don't think. Eventually, I think particularly on quality and for just giving our contributors free rein and things like that, we can. But you know what? I think from day one we could at least compete on speed. It can take 6 hours to 48 hours for news to drip down into English, and if I can do that alone, with my blog, beat the competition to some stories, and now we've got this sizable bilingual team, I think that we'll be able to maybe end up improving the SCMP, because they will see that we're fast in getting the news out, and we understand online better, I think.
I just got to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. And welcome back. Mr. Grundy, let's continue with this. What's going to make you vastly different from the South China Morning Post as a Standard? Is it just the speed of the breaking news, or what's going to make your stories quite different from the South China Morning Post or the Standard?
Speed to begin with, for sure, but if you look at some of the press freedom concerns, the Standard is owned by the Tsingtao, and there's business interests in the mainland which I think have affected some of the coverage in the SCMP. If you look at the print edition framing, how certain stories are presented, the front pages, how some may be buried, in addition to the editorials sometimes, which often have a pretty pro-Beijing slant, there are some concerns there. That's not to say a lot of the journalists working there and the frontline reporting isn't excellent. I think much of it is.
So you believe this South China Morning Post is pro-Beijing?
No, I think some of the editorials have that slant for sure, and there are press freedom concerns which bodies such as Reporters Without Borders and Committee to Protect Journalists have touched upon.
Self-censorship, you mean?
Yes, certainly. And myself, I uncovered issues with the Tiananmen Multimedia Project, but the live blog, for instance, during Occupy, it was excellent. Disappeared halfway through though, and then became very tough in English to learn what was going on. And we almost can't compete because they're behind a paywall anyway. So we'll be doing something quite different. And the websites for RTHK and the Standard are something out of the 90s. So we hope to be, as we establish ourselves and break news and get a reputation for doing so quickly, we hope to be our audience's first go-to source for news.
So there is that accusation that South China Morning Post is actually quite pro-Beijing. So does that mean Hong Kong Free Press will take the opposite side at all, of being more pro-democracy?
Well, we're not going to be pro-Beijing or pro-democracy. It's going to be more impartial. I know there's no such thing as objectivity and all these debates, which are quite circular, but anybody of whatever colour is able to approach us to become a contributor, and we welcome them. At the same time, we've said that we are a liberal and progressive news outfit. I think all of us feel the same, that journalism should be on the right side of justice at the same time. But certainly we welcome pro-Beijing voices onto the platform too.
Do you have any credible coming up, or
it's been tough, but we're still searching. I think just there's the language issue for a start. That side of politics in Hong Kong are not as good, I suppose, in communicating in English. But it's I'm not sure, but I think we need to prove that we're a platform for anybody, and so then I think they will hopefully be more keen to jump on board.
Journalists have complained that English news gathering as a whole has become increasingly difficult. There are officials that do not repeat their statements in English. Press releases sometimes, or even blogs by certain officials, are only in Chinese. So how are you going to overcome that hurdle?
I remember on ATV, I think last year, your reporters made a stand against was it Ambrose Lamb, the Law Society?
Of the Law Society, yes.
Yeah, for refusing to answer questions in English, and it is an issue. It's an official language, so it can be more of a struggle sometimes to understand what's going on. Not only that, just as we are an online news source, we are going to have issues accessing the government offices and going to press conferences with the chief executive and such. So, those two issues can be somewhat of a hindrance, and there's some responsibility on the government to improve things there and to be less archaic about their attitudes to online news. It's how most of us consume news nowadays, and also to communicate in both languages, so that everyone, including minorities in Hong Kong, can make the right decisions. If we're going to have this debate about democracy, we also need a free press, and that press needs to understand what's going on.
So you believe that the government has a bias towards the online media? They only tend to favor the traditional media?
We know they do. Yeah. It's a struggle to get into LegCo, and it's damn near impossible to attend press conferences.
What do they say? You're not journalists, or?
Well, I know in media have managed to get into some of these, but generally all of the online press have been declined entry. I don't know if it's that they feel that the more traditional print media are likely to be less critical, but it has to modernize. It's a press freedom issue in itself almost.
I see. So if Hong Kong Free Press had been around during the umbrella movement, how do you think the coverage would have differed from the rest of the media during that time?
We would have been and will be a truly local news source in English, and I don't think that exists. So some of the frontline coverage you were seeing in some of the Chinese independent media, even with the Apple Daily with their live streams, we would all be on the ground, minute by minute, giving updates. Because
you were quite active on Twitter.
And through Twitter, I got some other freelance opportunities with BBC and Global Post and Sky and some others. So certainly cut my teeth, and it was a big international story.
But Hong Kong Free Press, if it had been around.
Yeah, now we have a platform, and I wish it was around.
What would have made it different?
We would have been on the absolute, pulse of what was happening, and on the front lines, and using those social media tools, and updating very quickly what was happening. I mean, it's likely this year, whether the constitutional reform package passes or not, we will have big protests, and so a lot of the time we're going to have to be chained to our desk because we need to keep our eye on the breaking news. But if things kick off like that, we're going to be the go-to source for sure.
And this week there's been a lot of buzz about columnists from the South China Morning Post being released from their regular columns, or they've even been moved back to a less favorable area in the paper. Examples are Philip Bowering and Howard Wynn, Steve Vines. But do you buy the South China Morning Post explanation that they're just there to revamp, diversify, and deepen the scope of their op-ed section? Or do you think there was a different motive there?
People talk to me, but I'm not sure what happens internally. But clearly there's some turmoil and some restructuring going on. Funnily enough, Steve Vines, Howard Wynn, Tim Hamlet, who worked for them a long time ago,
they seem to be jumping ship onto Hong Kong Free Press.
Yeah, a lot of them have become contributors.
I said, well, have they mentioned to you at all?
Tom Holland as well. He'll be doing a weekly business column.
Have they mentioned at all what they think is going on at the South China Morning Post? I've
met a couple of them. My partner Evan has met the rest of them, and And no, to be honest, we didn't talk about it that much. It came up, but no, I have no clear idea, and I wouldn't want to speculate. But it does seem curious that those particular columnists, were chosen for the chop.
You said Hong Kong press freedom is eroding. Do you have clear examples of that, or is that
how
just...
long you got? Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that columnists in the China Daily and SCMP have denied there's a problem. There's a very eloquent speech by Kevin Lau, who found, we had a chopper in his back.
Right.
So a year or so ago, ex-Ming Power editor.
Yes.
I mean, there were 5 or 6 other incidents around that, physical attacks on journalists, and 24 during Occupy. There's been commercial boycotts of the Apple Daily, which has a more pro-democracy stance. Standard Chartered and HSBC withdrawing their advertising. Questionable sackings of the commercial radio host last year. So it's almost death by 1,000 cuts. It's an avalanche of these different incidents, and you have Freedom House, who've downgraded us this year in their press freedom rankings. Reporters Without Borders, Committed to Protect Journalists, the Penn Report in January. So multiple reputable international watchdogs who have warned, that the situation is critical. And I think one of the reasons, as you said, we've got a lot of attention is that we're sick of reading about that, and this is a positive response to it. It's a direct response to it.
So, but don't you and your colleagues worry that you may feel this pressure coming from certain interests that don't want you to report a certain way or certain subject? How are you going to deal with that?
It's occurred to us, but I think for some reason there is a level of protection in English. It's less likely you're likely to be attacked.
Why is that?
I'm not sure. Perhaps they're monitoring less closely, but also we're structured in a way where we don't have those kind of weaknesses. So we have several income streams. We're not for profit, so we're less beholden to commercial pressure like that. And also our website is as secure as we can make it, with the same level of protection as HKUPOP and Apple have used with Cloudflare and other methods, because we envisage we could have issues, but we're doing all we can to combat them.
Do you think you'll be able to get the information you want, or the story that you're looking to break, unless you compromise a little with the supposed forces that are suppressing press freedom?
No, I don't understand how it would influence things. I mean,
because the word going around is, especially in social media, is that unless you compromise a little, you're not going to get the source, quote unquote. And they have to report in a certain favorable way or not favorable way. This is all that's been speculative. But it's hard not to succumb to that type of pressure, because if press freedom is eroding and and the current press in Hong Kong is succumbing to that pressure, really, do you really think that you will not face that pressure and not succumb to it even a little bit?
I can't envisage situations where we would have to make such compromises. Okay. I don't know how they would fit in, and we would much rather be an attack dog, keeping the powerful to account in all the traditional journalistic kind of vision of what we're meant to be doing, than somehow making compromises like that for a story. I'd rather keep it legitimate.
All right. Well, Mr. Grundy, thank you so much for coming in. And just a reminder again, you can like us on our Facebook page. Just search ATV Newsline. You can keep up with all our updates there. Thank you for joining me today. I'll be back next week.